Ist Lena Bassermann. Ich arbeite für das entwicklungspolitische Netzwerk in Kota. Ich freue mich, dass heute Morgen viele schon einige den Weg zu uns gefunden haben, um über die Umsetzung der UN-Erklärung der Rechte von Bäuerinnen und Bauern und anderen Menschen, die im ländlichen Raum arbeiten, kurz UNDROP, in Deutschland zu sprechen. Das Seminar veranstalten wir gemeinsam mit der Arbeitsgemeinschaft Bäuerliche Landwirtschaft, mit FIA in Deutschland, mit Unterstützung von der Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung, Miserio, Brot für die Welt, Weltfriedensdienst, Oxfam Deutschland, Fairtrade und Fairtrade Deutschland. Die UNDROP wurde im Dezember 2018 verabschiedet von der Vollversammlung der Vereinten Nationen und stellt dann wirklich einen Meilenstein für das Recht auf Nahrung dar. Wir sind jetzt in einer Situation, in der alle Staaten aufgefordert sind, die Inhalte der Erklärung umzusetzen und damit die Rechte der Menschen zu stärken, die in der Landwirtschaft und in der Weiterverarbeitung landwirtschaftlicher Produkte arbeiten. Und genau darum soll es in unserem Seminar gehen, nämlich die Umsetzung der UNDROP. Wir freuen uns, dass wir heute den Auftakt bilden können zu der dreiteiligen Seminarserie die sich so nun wie folgt zusammensetzt. Eigentlich war es mal als dreiteiliges Präsenzseminar geplant. Nun aufgrund der Covid-19-Situation haben wir uns entschieden, ein zweigeteiltes Seminar zu machen. Zunächst 2 Online-Sitzungen heute und am Dienstag. Und am Mittwoch wird dann in Kassel ein Präsenzseminar stattfinden. Vielleicht noch für ganz Kurzentschlossene, wer noch nach Kassel kommen möchte, kann sich auch gerne im Anschluss noch bei uns melden. Ich werde jetzt noch mal kurz was zum Ablauf sagen und vor allen Dingen zur Technik zuerst. Vielleicht mal das Wichtigste vorneweg. Sie sehen unten in der Leiste ein Symbol, das so aussieht. Ich halte es mal in die Kamera. Das ist für die Dolmetschung. Also es gibt die Möglichkeit, das Seminar auf Englisch oder auf Deutsch anzuhören. Wie Sie hören, die Moderation und die Fragen werden auf Deutsch sein. Die Vorträge sind beide auf Englisch. Wer das auf Deutsch übersetzt bekommen möchte, kann das unten auswählen und eben auch umgekehrt. Wenn es Fragen dazu gibt oder Probleme für den technischen Support, bitte alles in die Chat-Funktion schreiben, die wir haben, die Sie auch hier unten sehen. Und da werden die Fragen dann auch direkt beantwortet. Wie Sie auch gemerkt haben, ist die Kamerafunktion ausgeschaltet. Und wir möchten die Rückfragen zu den Präsentationen und auch zur Diskussion gerne alle über die Fragen- und Antwortfunktion, die Sie unter dem F und A auch hier unten mit den beiden Sprechblasen unten im Bild sehen können. Dort einfach alles reinschreiben, was Sie zu den Vorträgen, zu dem Thema wissen möchten. Gertrud Falk von FIA in Deutschland wird die Fragen sammeln, auch ein bisschen clustern und sich dann zu Wort melden, um die Fragen auch zu stellen. Ein weiterer Punkt, wir zeichnen das Webinar auf, möchten natürlich alle datenrechtlichen Sachen wahren und werden daher auch nicht die Fragen, also die Namen, die in der Frage- und Antwortfunktion auftauchen, laut vorlesen. Also das wird anonymisiert quasi gestellt werden. Genau, also das waren jetzt erstmal so die kurzen technischen Punkte vorab. Ich freue mich sehr, dass Ramona Duminicioiu und Genevieve Savigny, beide von der Europäischen Koordination von Campesina, heute bei uns sind und freue mich sehr auf die Vorträge. Jetzt freue ich mich aber zunächst und ich muss jetzt einmal schauen, ob Georg Jansen von der Arbeitsgemeinschaft Bäuerlicher Landwirtschaft schon bei uns ist. Er wird nämlich zuerst ein kurzes Grußwort auch von Seiten der ABL noch an uns richten. Genau, ich muss jetzt... Genau, Georg, bist du schon da? Weil er kam direkt aus einer anderen Sitzung. Das war, glaube ich, jetzt ganz knapp bei ihm, dass er es pünktlich schafft. Ich glaube, er ist noch nicht da, wenn ich das... jetzt ist sie da. Gut, Annemarie schreibt es da. Okay, dann würde ich jetzt mal das Wort an Georg Jansen übergeben. Georg. Okay, ich kann ihn nicht hören. Nee, wir können Georg leider nicht hören. Gerade im Test hat das vorhin funktioniert. Okay, da gibt es, glaube ich, ein technisches Problem. Deshalb würde ich jetzt das spontan einfach so machen, dass ich jetzt schon mal wir weitermachen und ich kurz Ramona Duminicioiu vorstelle und wir ihren Vortrag hören und wir dann einfach nachher von Georg Jansen nochmal ein paar Worte hören werden. Ramona, vielleicht kurz einleitend ein paar Worte zu Ramona. Sie ist selbst Bäuerin und kommt aus Rumänien. Sie ist Mitglied des Koordinierungskomitees von Eco-Rurales, das ist eine Kleinbauernorganisation in Rumänien, und ist, wie schon gesagt, Mitglied des Koordinierungskomitees der Europäischen Koordination von La Via Campesina. La Via Campesina ist wahrscheinlich meistens ein Begriff, ist ein Zusammenschluss von insgesamt über 30 nationalen, regionalen Bauernorganisationen, Landarbeitern, ländlichen Organisationen aus über 21 europäischen Ländern. Ich kenne Ramona Duminicioiu vor allen Dingen, weil sie in internationalen politischen Prozessen auch sehr aktiv ist. Sie ist Mitglied des Koordinierungsausschusses des zivilgesellschaftlichen Mechanismus beim Welternährungsausschuss der Vereinten Nationen, dem CFS. Dort ist sie im Moment, koordiniert sie mit den Verhandlungsprozess zu den freiwilligen Leitlinien für Ernährungssystemen. Ein kontroverser Prozess, der gerade läuft. Da war sie auch die ganze Woche sehr eingespannt und deshalb freue ich mich umso mehr, dass sie heute Zeit hat, trotzdem Zeit gefunden hat, hier dabei zu sein und uns einen Vortrag zu halten. Sie wird zunächst etwas sagen zu dem, wie es zu UNDROP kam, zu den Hintergründen, was der Wert ist der UNDROP aus bäuerlicher Sicht, und wird Bezüge herstellen zu aktuellen politischen Prozessen und wie die UNDROP, wie die da zur Anwendung kommen kann. Daher würde ich jetzt das Wort an Ramona übergeben und ja, und Alicia bitten die Präsentation auch.
Thank you so much. And hello to everybody. Thanks to the organizers for organizing such an important discussion. Because in these incredible times that we're living, critical times that we're living, talking about human rights and especially about the rights of the essential people who produce the food to feed the world is the most important thing, and it's the most timely thing that we can do. I prepared the presentation, so if it's possible to share it on the screen. So my presentation is structured basically on 3 questions, and the first question that I would like to address is really about the history of the UN Declaration for the Rights of Peasants that you just heard before. It was approved 2 years ago in the United Nations. Where does it come from? Also in terms of need. So the necessity to have an instrument that protects and promotes our rights as humans that live in the rural areas and produce food came from sufferance, came from the fact that the rural communities, the most vulnerable people, the poor, are more and more discriminated against, marginalized by the society, exploited oftentimes, and have their rights violated. So the existing instruments that address human rights don't seem to be strong enough to protect the rural people. So there was a need to have something that is particular, that is adapted to the situation, and that protects in a very specific way the people who work with land, with seeds, with water resources, and produce food. as you know, we have La Via Campesina as an international peasant movement, who was the space where this thinking articulated for the fact that we need to protect our human rights and we need to go to the highest level and build instruments to protect us, because otherwise we're going to disappear. And the first organization, a member organization in La Via Campesina to spark these discussions was SPI, Serikat Petani from Indonesia, who actually played a major role throughout the entire process. Just to illustrate the extremely long process and complex process that involved thousands of people who organized protests, who organized events, lobbied their own governments, educated the public, discussed and built partnerships within the civil society, with academics, and with many, many actors that actually contributed to this history and this process of peasant rights. So this is just an illustration that you see now on the screen. It started in 2001 and concluded successfully in 2018. So for 17 years, we worked together. We started officially the process in the Human Rights Council in 2013. After having 5 sessions of negotiations in Geneva, we managed to have the official adoption in New York in 2018 at the General Assembly. If we go forward now with our presentation, I would just like to mark some key moments in this history. I mean, German people actually know a lot about this declaration because Germany played an important role. The German civil society was extremely active, lobbying its own government and supporting also the global process. And we had actually a key moment in the process in Schwäbisch Hall in Germany in 2017. We organized a very important congress, bringing together allies organizations, but also German officials and different supporters from many sectors. And this moment actually was internally and organizationally crucial, quite crucial. It was just the year before the adoption of the declaration, and it really pushed us through the eventual adoption. And going forward, just for you to see, this was the last negotiation sessions. It's a moment in time back in 2018 where we have together indigenous people sitting with us, fisher folks, workers, so people. So basically representatives of food producers constituencies who work together in partnership, and of course different NGOs from human rights domain or to different kind of other domains. We have obviously some German participants there as always. And if we go forward now to the next slide, we see the just this final moment where we managed to get the declaration adopted. Lobbying Europe, it was not easy. Most of European countries, as you can see here, and as you probably already know, abstained. But the fact that Europe as a whole didn't play a negative part in this was thanks to the incredible work of all the organizations from our region and the farmers' organizations especially, who lobbied our governments to at least not damage the final result and to allow this declaration to be adopted, because it's also an instrument that it's needed in Europe, not only in the global south, where indeed the situation of the small farmers is dramatic. Going forward, the second question we need to ask ourselves and to answer, to try to answer, is really what is the added value and the power of this instrument from a peasant perspective? Well, First of all, I would like to tell you that having rights, it's very important, because rights are different from other concepts, you know, that governments are using or the private sector is using to say that everything is okay. First of all, I would like to tell you that there is an important difference between rights and access, because access always depends on what kind of resources we have available. For example, financial resources. We have money, we have access to the market, we have access to infrastructure, we have access to many things. Access also doesn't prioritize social issues. For example, it doesn't matter that you're poor, or it doesn't matter that you come from a vulnerable place. Access is never about prioritizing, you know, the vulnerable and affected communities. While human rights are actually about all that, and they're universal, they're applicable to the people, to all people, especially to the ones that are in need, that are discriminated against. And they're also defined and protected by law. They're not just applied selectively. They're guaranteed. So being included in law, it's very important, and being recognized and negotiated and accepted by governments is very important. And just a small differentiations between rights of humans and rights of corporations, because in the past century we witnessed an evolution of the rights of corporations, for example. And corporations' rights include intellectual property rights, patents, copyrights, and they are applied not only to, they're applied in some cases to people as well, but they're applied mostly to juridical entities, to companies. And human rights have different kinds of categories that protect us from a social point of view, from a civil point of view, economic, culturally, politically, and they are applied only to people, the human rights. And this is an important distinction that we need to make when we try to see how important and powerful is to have human rights, and particularly having peasant rights. If we go forward to the next slide, we have to try to understand what exactly did we achieve through this Peasant Rights Declaration. In the United Nations system, we have recognized the social rights, the cultural rights, the economic rights, political and civil rights. What we managed to achieve through this declaration is getting rights to natural resources. For people in the rural areas who produce food, for peasants, it's fundamental, the access and having rights to the natural resources is extremely important, because the natural resources for us are primary means of production. Without them, we cannot be peasants. Without land, without seeds, without water, we cannot be what we really are. So going forward to the next slide, we just briefly can see in the declaration, in the content of the declaration, what these rights to natural resources are. First of all, they're mentioned in the definition. So our nature is of the people who are living in the rural areas, and they're connected to the land, not only as an occupation, but as a way of life. And we have a specific right to land and natural resources. We have a specific right to environment, a right to seeds, right to biological diversity, and to water, that are articulated in the declaration. And of course, the declaration, thanks to the work of German organization, has been translated into German, and you can see in detail how these rights are defined. Going forward to the next slide. We really have to understand what does this piece of paper, how how we have to transform this piece of paper into something that becomes reality, that actually changes for the better the life and livelihoods of us, the food producers, the rural men and women around the globe. Well, it means, first of all, to get organized, and to push. Nobody is going to implement this declaration for us. We will have to continue to do the work ourselves. We are talking about a voluntary instrument that countries are not forced to implement automatically in the national legislation. So the efforts to implement this declaration must continue, and we must always take the lead. First of all, the process must be built collectively. The more actors are involved in the implementation process, the bigger are the chances for this declaration to be implemented. It starts with making awareness, first of all, of our authorities, but also the larger public, and of course the peasants themselves. There are a lot of peasants, hundreds of millions of peasants around the world, who are not aware that their rights have been defined in the United Nations systems, and that they are not aware that they can claim these rights and they can use these rights to defend themselves. So awareness is key. And then we need to build capacity for the peasants and the farmers organizations to learn how to lobby, to learn how to promote this instrument and push for authorities to recognize these rights. And then we need to have inclusive processes. In many countries around the world, including in Europe, governments are not used to discuss with us and to include us in decision-making processes. So we need to push always for our rights to be at the table and discuss about agricultural policies, and use always this instrument to make a case for the smallholders. And then partnerships. Partnership is key. Partnership, cooperation, coordination in the society as a whole, bringing together farmers, bringing together consumers, building together NGOs, bringing together academics. We need absolutely everybody to get with us in this struggle. And finally, another key point in making sure that this declaration is implemented is monitoring and evaluation. We need to always keep accountable governments and ask them where they are with the implementation of this declaration. Why don't they implement it already? Always monitor how many rights continue to be violated, despite the fact that we have this instrument that protects our right in the United Nations system. And report these violations, and report it to the government and to other international fora. Okay, so we have to understand the time is of issue, so we will continue with the slides. Next and next slide. We're not going to get into details thematically, what kind of requirements are necessary for peasant rights to be respected in the national legislation. We're going to go straight to the last question, because you know, this United Nations Declaration has global implications, and we need to connect it with the different global processes and to different existing instruments in order to implement it. Going forward to the next slide, I prepared for you, next slide. So this is an illustration that shows you how complex the United Nations system is, and how hard the work is really at global level to connect the declaration, to make all the spaces that are relevant for food and agriculture talk about peasant rights. Yes, there are some there is a new instrument that needs to be connected with different negotiations processes, or with different works of United Nations agencies, or that needs to be discussed in the implementation of other treaties, other instruments. Globally, there are 3 UN spaces around the world that are relevant for us. It's Geneva, which is a space of generally where we talk about human rights. It's Rome, where we generally talk about food security and nutrition. And it's New York, where we talk mostly about the more political it's the most political fora space of the United Nations, where we have the General Assembly of the United Nations and other UN charter bodies. In this scheme, you see different level of different spaces. You see, as I said, treaties. You see, in terms of treaties, there are interesting, important treaties that are relevant. For example, in Geneva, we have the Convention on Biological Diversity. In Rome, we have the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources. And in New York, we have the UN Framework for action on climate change. And we have different agencies and the institutions. For example, in Geneva, we have the Human Rights Council. In Rome, we have the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. And in New York, we have the ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council of the UN. And all of these spaces are connected. All of these spaces are relevant for us because we try with this declaration to shift the paradigm in public policies, how public policies are shaped for agriculture, from an economic perspective, where governments try to support the ones who make profit, the most rich, towards a direction of human rights, where the poorest and the most vulnerable people are prioritized and put at the center and at the table of decisions. So this is just the global picture. Going forward to the next slide. To the next slide. Thank you so much. This is a picture. No, up. So this is just another picture to show you how the European processes are relevant, and also how complex they are in the European Union, but also in our region as a whole, because Europe is not exclusively composed of EU space. So we have on one hand the European Union political processes, where we have, you know, all the known institutions, from the Parliament to the European Commission to the European Union's Council, with all the relevant subsidiary spaces. And we have also FAO in our region, which includes also countries from Eastern Europe and also Central Asia. When we look at our region, we also need to see, look not only at the institutional spaces, but also what kind of spaces of alliance we have built. And we, La Via Campesina, together with our allies, built the Alliance for Food Sovereignty for Europe and Central Asia, which is called the Nieleni. Most of you probably know about it. It's a space of alliance that allows us to influence discussions with governments and with institutions in our region. Going forward. Just it's really important to know that you know, the work is really complex. It's quite difficult to include the peasant rights in different international processes. I listed here 3 processes where the peasant rights are being lobbied. The first one is an instrument that is for food systems and nutrition, voluntary guidelines for food systems and nutrition. It's an instrument that is being negotiated right now. Actually, after this call, I'm participating in this process on behalf of La Via Campesina, through the civil society and the indigenous peoples mechanism, who is ensuring the relation with the Global Committee for Food Security. So this instrument is under negotiation by governments. It's supposed to conclude in December 2020. after concluding this wonderful event with you, I will step in the negotiations which are right now happening. There's a lot of support from some countries for including peasant rights and including references to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Peasants in these voluntary guidelines. But there are also countries who strongly oppose. Like, for example, the United States and the Russian Federation. But we do have from our region strong support from Switzerland, and we're very proud of that. Unfortunately, European Union is not as open. They are supportive, but in a, extremely tempered way. And actually, it's important to have this conversation because it's the German government who represents the voice of the European Union in this negotiation, because right now Germany has the presidency of the European Council. So what a timely discussion, and what a relevant discussion indeed. The results of these negotiations, so these voluntary guidelines, will actually contribute to the United Nations Summit for Food Systems, which is supposed to take place next year. And we're hoping that having integrated the peasant rights in these voluntary guidelines will help also influence discussions in this UN system summit, which is unfortunately also not an ideal event, but nobody said it's going to be easy, for sure. There are other examples, you see them listed there, but I'm not going to talk about them. We can probably go forward. There are different instruments that have been already negotiated that will always try to link with peasant rights, already achieved rights in, for example, when it comes to rights to seed, we have this International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources. For the European Union space, we have an interesting new organic farming rule that has some interesting stipulations on the right to sell seeds from heterogeneous materials, so from traditional seeds, and other instruments that complement the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Peasants from other perspectives. Going forward, I will finish with a very short parallel with another declaration for the rights of indigenous people, which is a very similar instrument to UNDROP, to the Peasant Rights Declaration. In the case of the indigenous people, they negotiated over 30 years, so much longer than us, than the peasants. And it was adopted back in 2007. Let's just go forward to the next slide. Well, this is just an illustration to show you where the indigenous people are active in the United Nations system, so that they promote their rights, to promote their indigenous people's rights and the implementation of their declaration. Just like in the previous illustration, where we showed the global processes, they're active in different spaces from Rome, New York, Geneva, and for example, they have their interest. They have a strong interest in climate change spaces, in spaces that deal with pesticides or with dangerous substances in mining. And they're also active in WTO, which is a different strategy than La Via Campesina. They criticize the World Trade Organization by participating inside its process. So there are similarities with what we're doing as La Via Campesina, but there are also different ways, different approaches from the indigenous people's side. And just maybe let's go forward, and this is the last slide. There is a long list of mechanisms that the indigenous people build in the United Nations system to support the implementation of their declaration and their rights overall. And I would just say that what they created is, for example, a special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous people, which is a very interesting institution, actually. that is supporting that is monitoring the declaration, the implementation of the Indigenous Peoples Declaration, and that it's reporting on violations of Indigenous Peoples' rights to many United Nations bodies from Geneva, Rome, and New York. And another interesting thing that the Indigenous people did, they had until now 2 decades of for the Indigenous people, which are frameworks where governments are encouraged to promote public policies in support of Indigenous peoples. And of course, they created different bodies in different spaces, Geneva and New York, that monitor, promote the declaration, monitor its implementation, and so on and so forth. So this would be it from my side. I'm really sorry for taking so long. Thank you so much. Please just show the last picture. It's a peasant lady from my village that is working in the vineyard of my family farm. So thank you so much, and looking forward for the questions session. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Ramona, für diesen sehr ausführlichen Überblick. Zum einen, wie die Geschichte oder wie es zur UNDROP kam, aber vor allen Dingen auch, was jetzt so die Schritte der Umsetzung sind und vor allen Dingen diese Komplexität nochmal darzustellen im internationalen System, im UN-System. Ich glaube, es sind jetzt über die Frage- und Antwort-Funktion, wenn ich das richtig gesehen habe, Gertrud meldet sich. Ich würde einmal kurz an Gertrud übergeben, habe dann aber auch noch eine Frage. Ramona.
Ja, die erste, sehr kurze Frage ist an dich, Ramona, ob es möglich wäre, deine Präsentation hinterher den Teilnehmerinnen zur Verfügung zu stellen.
Ramona, ich glaube, du bist noch stumm geschaltet. Kannst du?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the presentation is available to the organizers, and I think it would be nice. It's unfortunately in English, but absolutely, I would be extremely happy that this presentation is shared. Of course.
Okay. Super, genau. Dann machen wir das natürlich sehr gerne hinterher. Gertrud, hattest du noch mehr?
Es waren nur Fragen jetzt zwischendurch zum Verlauf, die sind beantwortet, wenn ich das richtig sehe. Wenn ich das falsch verstanden habe, bitte ich die Fragenden, das nochmal zu schreiben. Sonst sehe ich gerade keine neuen Fragen. Ich hätte eine, aber Lena, du hattest auch eine.
Na, bitte.
Also meine Frage an Ramona ist, ich habe jetzt gesehen, dass ihr sehr intensiv auch nochmal reingeht in so freiwillige Prozesse bei den Vereinten Nationen, bei der FAO zum Beispiel, dass ihr dort die UNDROP in solche freiwilligen Richtlinien oder Standards reinbringt. Und das ist jetzt eine Frage von mir, ist das nicht ein Rückschritt, weil ihr habt ja nun schon eine mehr oder weniger verbindliche Menschenrechtserklärung erreicht. Und freiwillige Richtlinien sind ja viel schwächer völkerrechtlich gesehen. Wie ist das zu bewerten? Warum macht ihr das und warum konzentriert ihr euch nicht stärker auf neue, richtig verbindliche rechtliche Instrumente? Das wäre meine Frage.
Ramona, kannst du direkt darauf antworten?
Yeah, well, it's actually the objective of La Via Campesina that this declaration is used to create also a binding instrument, an instrument that is obliging the governments to implement it in the national legislations. In terms of content, the Declaration for the Rights of Peasants is much more advanced than the Universal Declaration for the Human Rights. Simply because of the time when the Universal Declaration for Human Rights was created, we didn't have problems with Monsanto, who was going in the fields of the people to claim their copyrights over human rights and to punish farmers for being accidentally contaminated against their will with genetically modified organisms. which is something that this Declaration for the Rights of Peasants is addressing very well. So it's not at all a step back, the Peasant Rights Declaration. It's actually a huge step forward, but it's important that we continue the work at global level and at national level, most importantly, to create also a binding instrument based on this Peasant Rights Declaration.
Mhm. Ja, ich habe jetzt noch eine weitere Frage. Ich weiß nicht, Lena, ob du erst deine stellen möchtest.
Nee, bitte.
Also, hier ist die Frage, welche Konferenz der Vereinten Nationen ist das, die du erwähnt hast, die im nächsten Jahr stattfinden soll, und welche genau ist das?
Mhm.
Can you please repeat? I didn't hear the interpretation.
Okay, I can say it in English. So you mentioned the United Nations conference, which would take place next year, and someone would like to know which exactly conference is that and when exactly will it take place?
Yes, the United Nations Summit for Food Systems. It's a global event that will take place towards the end of 2021. The date is not yet established. Unfortunately, the drivers of this event, the ones who are coordinating the organization of this event, are not our allies. It's the World Economic Forum, who's promoting a lot the agenda of corporations, and also different United Nations institutions who didn't prioritize in the process until now, didn't prioritize small farmers organizations. They actually involved until now the industrial farmers only. And it's a difficult process. We are trying to see what's the best way. We're still trying to see what's the best way to deal with this event. But negotiating the voluntary guidelines for food systems and nutrition now in the Global Committee for Food Security, it's important because in terms of content, this is what the Global Committee for Food Security will present at this summit. So even if we're not going to be at the table, maybe the content that will be presented there should speak about us. So this is a way to deal with this summit.
Okay.
I hope that answered.
Ja, definitiv die Frage beantwortet. Ich glaube, der UN Food System Summit, der so in der Tradition ja auch der Welternährungskonferenzen stehen soll, wird uns, glaube ich, nächstes Jahr stark beschäftigen. Mich würde, bevor die Zeit schreitet fort, deshalb würde ich gleich weiter zu Genevieve gehen. Eine kurze Frage, die ich mir noch gestellt habe. Du hast ja gut dargestellt, was die Komplexität der UN-Prozesse, du hast ja auch nochmal deutlich gesagt, keiner wird die UNDROP für uns implementieren, also es wird immer diesen starken Kampf und Einsatz brauchen in den UN-Prozessen. Wo siehst du denn, aber was würdest du sagen, aus deiner Sicht ist die größte Herausforderung? Also ist es die Aufmerksamkeit, überhaupt die Bekanntheit der UNDROP zu haben, dass sie in die Prozesse kommt? Sind das die politischen Gegner, Kräfte, die Interessen daran haben, dass sie nicht in den Dokumenten steht? Wo siehst du so aus Sicht von der Campesina die größte Herausforderung gerade bei der Umsetzung der UNDROP auf UN-Ebene, also in UN-Prozessen?
Multiple challenges, unfortunately. So first of all, we're dealing with a historic discrimination. And there is very little awareness of how marginalized we have been as a rural community and rural people, and our own people, the small farmers, the peasants, they are not supported enough to claim their own rights. So there is a lot of work there to build capacity on the ground. but there are also obstacles in terms of the corporations and the powerful and rich farmers and the agro-businesses who were the main factors that degraded our human rights. So their power is enormous. They influence governments to such an extent that governments really prioritize the rights of corporations and the economic interest of corporations when they make public policies. And it's very hard for governments to now try to take a step back from that, take a look of what is happening in the world, and also address the real problems and try to come up with real solution instead of continuing with business as usual. So the corporations are a huge obstacle, and our governments are a huge obstacle, especially governments from industrialized and developed countries. So from Europe and from North America, these governments have been quite blind to the problems of the poor and quite deaf to our voice. And it's very, very hard to make ourselves heard and to be included in the discussions by these governments. Generally, the governments from the global south, from Latin America, Asia, Africa, have been much more sensitive to the problems of the poor and the problems of the marginalized people. So yeah, the obstacles are enormous and very, very deep, unfortunately.
Dankeschön. Ramona, du bist ja nachher auch noch in der Diskussion quasi dabei. Deshalb nochmal auch der Hinweis, alle Fragen gerne in die Fragen- und Antwortsektion schreiben. Es gibt nachher nochmal die Gelegenheit, auch weitere Fragen zu stellen. Ich freue mich jetzt, Genevieve Savigny vorstellen zu dürfen. Sie ist auch Landwirtin, studierte Landwirtin. Sie ist seit 1992 bewirtschaftet sie ihren Hof im Südosten Frankreichs. Sie ist seit über 25 Jahren im französischen Bauernverband Confédération Paysanne tätig, dort auch Vorstandsmitglied. Sie war lange auch im Koordinierungskomitee der Europäischen Koordination von der Campesina und befasst sich entsprechend auch schon sehr lange mit den Rechten von Bäuerinnen und Bauern. Sie ist zudem seit 2015 auch Mitglied des Europäischen Wirtschafts- und Sozialausschusses mit der französischen Delegation für den Bund Paysanne. Genevieve, ich freue mich, dass du jetzt auch nochmal auf die Relevanz der UNDROP in Europa eingehen wirst und nach der konkreten Implementierung und Beispielen, aber eben auch Herausforderungen hier in Europa berichten wirst, und würde dir jetzt das Wort übergeben.
Yes, thank you. Hello to everybody. I think in Europe we have a double responsibility. First, because our model is really dominating the situation. Like Ramona said, there is this question that a lot of farms in Europe are industrialized. Well, in fact, it's a bit difficult also in Europe because we have a mixture of different types of farming, but the modernized with a lot of investment model, which is more or less considered as the European model, seems to be exported to different countries and presented like a model, or considered like a model by a lot of governments from other countries, when in fact the other model, the peasant model, is the one which is employing over 70% of the population of farmers over the world. So this duality of models is something that makes the situation a bit difficult, because our model is really in influencing the world. But we know that also in Europe there are a lot of peasants, and it is the situation in Eastern Europe a lot, and Ramona will be able to come back on this maybe later, where it is dominating the picture in terms of numbers of people in rural areas, but also in Western countries where we are affected by the same mechanisms, like the competitions with larger farms and larger businesses who are taking over the farms, difficulties for young farmers to start farming because it's really difficult to find land and to get into the business, into the job. And so this is also why our responsibility is very big as European, but also us as European small farmers organization, to get involved from inside Europe, to influence European government to say we are peasants, there are peasants in Europe like all over the world. It is really important also that there is this declaration on peasants and that it is written large and very clearly with the definition. I think it is Article 5. I don't remember exactly, but what it says that peasants are producing food on small scale, all types of different kind of production, from farmers to animal farming, pastoralists, fisher folks, and there is kind of a continuity between farmers, landless, people who have other jobs. So it's a kind of a large definition, which is sometimes difficult for governments, I agree. But all of us, we depend on land, we depend on resources to make a living. So this is really what makes the difference. It is basic, it is vital. It is vital to have access to resources, to natural resources. And a lot of it is built on this definition. So this is why it is really important to get involved, either directly as farmers or as organizations to support farmers to have their voice in the picture. So what can we do? What can we do in Europe? Of course, it is first very important to disseminate, to know about this declaration, and a lot of peasants in different countries still don't know about this tool, and that it has been created. It has been done because of the farmers themselves. So it's something really everybody can be proud of, and so this is maybe the first step to take to make this declaration very well known everywhere. And then there are two ways. I think Ramona went very deeply into the way you can take the declaration and put it forward, either into official processes, into the processes at in the international bodies of the United Nations, but also at the levels of countries. It can be a little tricky, I must say, because as it was said, the European governments in general were not really in favor of this declaration. So they didn't vote it for, they just abstained. Only for Portugal, Luxembourg who voted in favor. And maybe another one, I forget. But it can be one thing to do, to go to the governments again, to the Ministry of Agriculture, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Development, well, depending on the countries, and to ask them to endorse it, to take a step to sign it. Actually, we've tried in France, and some deputy supported us to ask a question to the government. Unfortunately, the reply is always the same. They believe in universal rights, and they don't know what is a peasant, so whom does this declaration address? And also they see also some tricky issues with the right to land and the right to seeds. In France, it is very strong that the right to seeds, as we want it for peasants, really goes against the interests of big seed producers like Syngenta, Monsanto, or even smaller businesses, but who are really export oriented and who want to be able to develop their technology and so on. So maybe the other way to use it, and this is what we've been doing in France for the moment, is to try to understand the declaration and take parts of it to implement it through existing processes at European and national level. I will give an example. The CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, which is always a big policy in Europe, it is possible for us, and it is our duty, to try to show more about what would be a development towards peasant agriculture, peasant agroecology, which is also a word that is used in the declaration, and to move forward this agriculture when in fact you see through many different aspects in the CAP that they are also pushing a lot towards further industrialization, further intensification through now what is called digital revolution, and more investment in all these kind of digital tools and growing. Well, they don't say it's going to grow to mean that you have to grow bigger, but basically this is what it is about. Bigger, more modernized, and more competitive on global market, and including a bit more the question of environment. So this is one model. The other model, which would be peasant agroecology, is mentioned in documents, but it's very difficult to see it implemented. So for us, I think for farmers' organization, as well as for allies, this struggle will be very important in the coming weeks and months, because again, the Common Agricultural Policy is being discussed, is under discussion. What is new also, and what is very important, that at the moment the European Commission has put forward a strategy, which is a strategy for a global strategy for food. It's part of the Green Deal, which is a program to make Europe carbon neutral by 2050. And part of it is a strategy from farm to fork, and including some objectives to make a food system more sustainable. So for us, it is very important that food sovereignty, which is really the backbone of the declaration, it is very important that it is implemented and used in this farm to fork strategy, and to support this farm to fork strategy, which of course is challenged by industrial or large farms who say it's not possible to use less pesticides, or it will take time. So it is an ongoing process. It is at the European level, but also it will come to the national level. So it is also something where peasants have to be supported, and the rights of peasants, and the right to be supported in the European policies. Something which can also support peasants is the fact that European always claims to want to be inclusive, but now they have to prove it, that they can include the poorest, the smallest farmer, and also all the new entrants, all the young people who would like to be included in the farming sector. But what it is also a challenge for us, because that means that we'll have to discuss internally what is a peasant, how do we describe them in the different situations, what is a peasant, who do we want to include in Germany, who do we want to include in France, because we don't have always the same vision of how necessary it is for someone to have access to land, or to have access to the resources and to a status, but because this is our European reality, you will be nothing, or you will not have the right to sell your products, or to have land, or to cultivate your land, unless you have all the necessary authorizations and papers and everything. So it is also something which is really very very present in everyday farmer's life. To come back to some other examples, some other countries may choose also to have the countries move forward into the international negotiations. And this is, for example, the case of organization in Luxembourg. Since Luxembourg voted in favor of this declaration, the organizations which are supporting this process, especially SOS Fin Luxembourg, they are NGOs, they have gathered all the authorities and different NGOs and everybody to see how to move forward and to tackle the situation. And this has resulted into the decision to have an intergroup between different ministries to examine the situation and see how they can move forward. So also at the institutional level, do you have this kind of possibility to see how it can be also implemented in different processes, and some international processes can be very important at some national level, especially like it is now with Germany being at having the presidency of the European Union at the moment. It's very important that there is a move towards the government so that they take into account not only the needs of German farmers, but also of international peasants all over the world, where the situation can be very difficult. Challenges, I think I've already described a little that there is this duality of agriculture that not everybody is aware of, because you have this kind of continuity. You have big, medium farms, some farmers who would like to grow bigger, to be more industrialized, more mechanized, although they are not that big. And you have also large farms who are quite keen on not growing bigger, but having a lot of employment, and who consider themselves as peasants. So this question of what is a peasant, what is the agriculture, what is farming in Europe, how we want to develop it, and how we protect small farmers is really a question. Also, I think, well, this is really for me the main point, actually. This is why I wanted to insist on that. And no, the other challenge which is very big at the moment, with the pretext of the COVID crisis or whatever, I think human rights are really under threat. Globally, the priority is not given to human rights, to personal life, but to corporation and economic rights. So at the moment there is a big challenge to have human rights truly recognized, and for this the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants can be a very good entry point, because it is new, it is professional, it is something that we can use also as a tool to protect all human rights. So I think at the moment we have this kind also of responsibility. I think that will be the end for now, and I'll be happy to answer to all questions.
Ja, vielen Dank, Genevieve, für diesen spannenden Überblick und auch so diese konkreten Beispiele, was eben in der EU, auf EU-Ebene und was Ansatzpunkte eben auch in verschiedenen Ländern sind. Ich würde nochmal zu Gertrud übergeben, die Fragen im Blick hat.
Also ich sehe bisher keine Fragen. Ich könnte selber eine stellen.
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Also,
und zwar würde mich interessieren nochmal die Haltung des Europäischen Parlaments. Haben die dazu Stellung bezogen, UNDROP, oder zumindest vielleicht einige der politischen Gruppen im Europäischen Parlament?
Well, maybe I can start. Well, they voted a resolution supporting the declaration, but that was in the previous parliament. Now they have all changed, and because of this COVID crisis, I think it's been slowed down a lot, and I don't think it is on the top of the pile So the work has to be done again to make them aware of the existence of this declaration. So it's probably another task that we have on the table, because now there is nothing new, and they are new people. So we have to start again with many new people in the parliament. So for the moment, there's nothing new with this new legislation, with the new group of parliament in the parliament.
Yeah, here's someone announcing. I have 2 questions. Could you please write your questions? Ach so, Entschuldigung. Ja, hier kündigt jemand an, dass ich 2 Fragen habe, aber bitte schreibe diese Fragen.
Genau, vielleicht während die noch geschrieben werden. Ah, da kommt. Es geht weiter.
Ja, jetzt kommen 2 Fragen hier nochmal von. Also, eine Frage ist, sie hat eine Frage an Genevieve. Wie kann ein Kleinbauer, Kleinbäuerin geschützt werden von den Folgen von internationalem Handel? Die Preise zu drücken, nach unten zu drücken und überhaupt auch in die Lage gebracht zu sein, mit so ganz super billigen Nahrungsmitteln im Wettbewerb zu stehen. Und sie fragt, ob die UNDROP darauf auch sich bezieht, was die UNDROP dazu sagt.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the question of income and access to decent income is addressed in the Article 16, I think. It's not as strong as we would have wished it to be in Europe, because for us it is quite vital, the question of decent income and the competition with import. So there is also it is also mentioned that we should have access to local markets, and that government should be able to develop policies and good policies. But it is also, yes, so there is enough to use it into discussions concerning trade, and so it is really something we have to do, that is to go against trade agreements, new trade agreements like Mercosur and like CETA, that are really going against our income. So it is a tool. I don't say it is a strong tool for this. I guess it is stronger on the questions of land, seeds, biodiversity, because it is something a bit new. For trade, it is a tool, but yes, it's part of the discussion, that we should have access to a decent income and to be able to have policies to protect small farmers against this.
Gertrud, bitte.
Ja, ist eine weitere Frage. Fragt jemand, wie sinnvoll ist es, überhaupt nur zu diskutieren, wer Kleinbauern, Kleinbäuerinnen sind? Ist es nicht wichtiger, möglichst viele Betriebe und gesellschaftliche Gruppen mitzunehmen in den Prozess?
Yes, indeed, but it's something else. First, you need to have everybody, but then at one point there will need to be discussions who you want. When you get to policies, for instance, when you have when you have access to support, to subsidies, the question will be: do you have how do you call it, a limit of animals, for instance? Will you get your subsidies if you have 3 cows, or only if you have 30 cows? So this is also through these kind of criteria that you see if you are inclusive or not, if you support small peasants or not. So at one point it has to be discussed, what are the limits? Do you take other peasants, everybody who has land, or do you need or do you have some criteria? In England, with the cap, they excluded people who have less than 5 hectares. In Romania, if they do this, they will exclude 90% of the peasants. So you have these discussions that are very concrete, but that they refer to what is a peasant. What do you consider as a peasant, as needing the support or access to land? I give another example. In France, for access to land, when you buy land or when someone wants to sell land, it goes through a body, through an office, which is called a board, which is called the SAFER, where there is discussion about who will get the land. And you have priorities. And there's discussion, but also you have rules. There are rules that there will be priority for people who have lost their land and who have to be reallocated, or to young farmers, and then to small farmers who need a bit more. So all those discussions are kind of an implementation of this vision of what is farming, which model we want to develop. So, but I mean, it's not in the discussion on what is a peasant must not be a preliminary discussion to exclude anybody, but just something to have in mind because it will come on the table one day.
Okay, danke. Genevieve, ich würde einmal kurz, weil ich habe gesehen, es gehen jetzt kommen mehr Fragen rein, was total super ist. Im Anbetracht der fortgeschrittenen Zeit vielleicht nur zwei kurze Anmerkungen. Ich glaube, zum einen würde ich Ramona nochmal dazu nehmen. Also die Fragen, wenn Ramona, du auf die Fragen antworten möchtest, oder wir gehen jetzt teilweise auch an beide Referentinnen, dass du vielleicht auch die Kamera anmachst und ein Mikro, dann kannst du mitdiskutieren. Und der andere Punkt wäre, weil die Frage gerade auch nochmal aufkam, Georg Jansen war die ganze Zeit auch da, auch heute Morgen, wir hatten nur ein technisches Problem mit dem Mikro, also mit der Zuschaltung. Und er wird jetzt statt der begrüßenden Worte ein paar abschließende Worte nachher sagen. Also das machen wir dann am Schluss. Genau. Und jetzt würde ich wieder an Gertrud übergeben, die Fragen fest im Blick hat.
Ja, danke. Hier ist eine Frage, die sich direkt gerade an die andere, die gerade beantwortet wurde, auch nochmal anschließt, aber sie doch ein bisschen konkretisiert. Und zwar ist die Frage, ob denn La Via Campesina in einzelnen Ländern bereits versucht, genauer zu definieren, wer ein Kleinbauer, eine Kleinbäuerin ist.
Genevieve oder Ramona, wer von euch möchte zuerst? Stimmt, beide.
Well, in some, no, not really. In some countries it is obvious. You have very, very small farms, very, very big corporate farms. In Europe it is more difficult. And it's not on the table for the moment. But for instance, there is a discussion at the moment at the European Union. It's kind of it's one of the work that they're doing at the European Commission. They're discussing about farmers of tomorrow. In 2040, what will it be? And the work that was started does not mention peasant farming. It's either kind of corporate or kind of non-professional. So there is something wrong. We have to fight to be recognized as peasant farmers, like and who want to develop, So it's really. And we want small farmers, small young farmers to be included. So it is really important to have this discussion. Who will be the farmers of tomorrow? Who are the peasants? At European level, it is important. Over the world, in some countries, it is so obvious that there's no need for discussion.
Ja, gut. Jetzt kommt eine Frage an beide Referentinnen gerichtet. Da fragt jemand, in der EU und besonders auch in Deutschland stehen der Verwirklichung der UNDROP-Rechte viele Gesetze direkt entgegen und auch das politische Denken steht dem entgegen. Wo seht ihr aktuell die besten konkreten Ansatzpunkte?
Ramona, möchtest du vielleicht zuerst? Oder nochmal Genevieve? Ramona ist.
I don't know. From what I know from Germany, I remember that there was quite a good networks of NGOs working on the topic, and I guess it is worth working on the declaration itself and how to implement it in the different international processes. because there was this kind of good support from NGOs and from different groups, and yes, international processes will be important at the moment. I don't know how. And this question, yeah, Ramona mentioned this food summit. It is something also to have in mind, because it is the same question we have for farming. It's the same question for food systems, industrial food system, globalized or localized with peasants. And at the moment, this food system has been taken by, I would say, the representatives of the global food systems. So it is important that they take into account that many people in the world can eat because of small farmers and because of local food systems. And the resilience of the food systems and of society also relies on local, diversified food producers with a lot of small farmers. So it is really important to have this in mind. The struggle is on. I think it is really very accurate at the moment. It's really, there is a fight at the moment now. And they are going stronger. I mean, the large ones, the large ones.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's another question on trade issues. Sorry, so eine neue Frage an Handelsfragen. Die wurde auf Englisch gestellt. Ich lese sie mal auf Englisch vor. Decent income for farmers or living wages for agricultural workers would probably be an issue for the planned EU human rights due diligence, and I think, I don't know, maybe environmental rights due diligence directive, which is supposed to fully cover entire supply chains. Do you think the UNDROP should or could inform or strengthen this planned EU regulation?
Yes. No, yes, completely. Yes, we have really to push that the trade deals fully include all the human rights of workers, the environment, and all those progressive rights and directives. All should be included in the trade deal. If the trade deals are not stopped, they need to be fully included. Yes, sure.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Ramona ist wieder da.
Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry for there was a short interruption, unfortunately, and the interpretation didn't work briefly. I would just like to add that unfortunately we're living in this time of crisis. The first ones to take advantage of the crisis are the big industrial players who are trying to push forward for the trade agenda. For many years already, the trade has shaped public policies for food and agriculture. So the public policies try to meet the needs of profit, the needs of trade, rather than the needs of people for nutrition, for decent incomes, for human rights to be respected overall. So these first few months of the COVID crisis, since it started, we are witnessing how the corporations and the large retailers are trying to take full advantage of the chaos and the lack of capacity of governments to respond urgently and to respond to all the problems that have been generated by the crisis. We see violations of the workers, of the food workers, all across the food production sector, from the meat production to the field, to the packaging, and in absolutely everything that it means food sector. And it's really dramatic, and we also see how some more disadvantaged countries are being bullied in by financial institutions like IMF or the World Bank to privatize their natural resources in order to get money to respond to the COVID crisis. So this crisis, it's certainly going to make it harder for us to fight for the human rights, but that means it's more important. It's much more important now than ever to fight, to change the paradigm, to change the status quo, to change the business as usual, and to really push for the human rights, because they are important. If we don't do it by the end of this crisis, it's really going to be more than tragic and more than dramatic. So thank you so much.
Danke. Ramona, Gertrud, ich denke, da ist eine Frage noch. Genau, ich glaube, das wäre vielleicht auch die abschließende, weil aufgrund der Zeit wir dann weiter gucken müssen.
Ja. Ja, genau. Eine Frage jetzt nochmal zu ja, den Ansätzen und Prozessen innerhalb von La Via Campesina. Da fragt jemand, wie der Prozess zur UNDROP innerhalb von La Via Campesina oder auch von der Europäischen, also ECVC, organisiert ist. Und spezieller noch, wie haltet ihr den Kontakt zur Basis? Und wie stellt ihr sicher, dass ihr euch nicht auf der UN-EU-Ebene, also dieser obergeordneten Policy-Ebene, verliert und möglicherweise dadurch Kraft verloren geht?
Ramona oder Genevieve, wer von euch möchte beginnen?
Ramona.
Okay, I will start, and if Genevieve would like to add, I would be very happy. First of all, of course, when the COVID, I think, again, like everybody else, the COVID crisis has affected our way of work. And we spent the first months, since it started, we spent the first months to try to evaluate the situation, what is going on in the ground, and visibilize the problems of the farmers, the small farmers, and make them known to the authorities, make them known to the media, make them known amongst our members, so that they know that we're confronting basically with the same problems, and so that they also know that there are common solutions that can be used. So this was part of it, and we also tried to find a system that a new system of communication and of work, in considering the fact that we could not meet, and considering the fact that we are dealing with problems in the production in our farm that normally don't occur in normal circumstances. So I think what's important to say is also that in La Via Campesina Europe, we are organized in working groups who actually found a way to continue to for the peasant rights specifically, we try to use the process on CAP, which is an ongoing process, and it's been a priority in the past year for ECVC. So to try to push in the debate for the common agriculture policy for as much content as possible that would introduce more the rights of peasants and everything that is articulated in the declaration, not only in the CAP but also in the debates for this new strategy that was very urgently, quickly discussed by the European Commission. I mean, not only the European Commission, the farm to fork strategy. So we try to bring elements from the declaration also there. In the same time, the people from the ground didn't stop working. We've been using, for specific struggles, we've been using the rights of peasants, not only for members' organizations, but also supporting farmers' organizations from other countries where we don't have yet membership. For example, we supported quite a lot the struggle for land in Ukraine, using a lot the Peasant Rights Declaration and using the connection with institutions that were recreated during the lobbying for peasant rights. For example, we used a lot the connection with FAO, with the Food and Agriculture Organization, to try to influence the government of Ukraine in that sense. And in the ground, people continue to produce materials of information for public awareness on peasant rights, translating the declaration in different languages, and including in the national debates related to common agricultural policy, including again as much as possible from the declaration, from the peasant rights declaration. The strategy that was planned by La Via Campesina Europe following the adoption of the declaration was shaped last year during a big seminar that we organized internally, and also where we invited partners and different allies organizations. It's a strategy that speaks about how to incorporate in absolutely everything we're doing this instrument. I think that in the first part, when we made the presentation, we shared quite a lot about of this strategy. But what's important is our capacity to adapt to the crisis, to adapt the work to the crisis, because it's not very easy to visualize our messages and to especially to talk to governments. So yeah, it's the work and the strategy at European level is continuing to adapt, and it's quite complex, and I hope that answers at least partially the question, and if there's a more specific question, I'd be happy to answer.
Danke, Ramona. Genevieve, möchtest du noch was ergänzen dazu? Dann ansonsten würde ich...
No. No.
Okay, genau, dann danke Ramona für den Überblick und vielen Dank auch dir, Genevieve. Ich würde nämlich jetzt, weil wir wirklich schon, es ist schon halb, schnell an Georg Jansen übergeben, den Bundesgeschäftsführer der ABL. Ich freue mich sehr, Georg, dass du dabei bist und dass du auch das ganze Seminar begleiten wirst. Jetzt ist es kein Grußwort mehr, sondern sind abschließende Worte, aber ich würde dir mal das Wort übergeben jetzt.
Ja, vielen Dank an Lena. Ich habe das Grußwort gehalten, aber ihr habt mich nicht verstanden, ihr habt mich nicht hören können. Ich glaube, das geht uns vielen so. Wir haben viele gute Positionen und Forderungen in den letzten Jahrzehnten aufgestellt. Aber es hat viel Kraft gekostet, damit diese Forderungen und Positionen auch erhört werden. Ich möchte mich erstmal bedanken bei Lena, bei Paula und bei Gertrud, dass ihr diesen Diskussionsprozess hier erneut wieder ankurbelt und uns auch abbringt, dass wir uns damit auseinandersetzen, diejenigen, die auch in den aktuellen agrarpolitischen Auseinandersetzungen drinstehen. Und ich möchte mich auch sehr bedanken bei Ramona und Genevieve. Ich bin selber kein Sprachgenie, sondern ganz schwach auf dem internationalen Parkett. Deshalb kämpfe ich seit 37 Jahren hier in Deutschland für die Änderung der Agrarpolitik, gerade in Richtung kleine und mittelbäuerliche Landwirtschaft. Ich habe hohen Respekt vor eurer Arbeit. Durch Lena, Gertrud, Paula, Genevieve, Ramona. Ist ja kein Wunder, dass da jetzt nur Frauen sind. Ihr bringt es voran, dass wir uns damit auseinandersetzen, und deshalb hohen Respekt, aber auch nochmal vielen Dank von meiner Seite, dass ihr das tut. Ich will eine Sache in den Mittelpunkt stellen. Wir hatten gerade eine Europäische Agrarministerkonferenz in Koblenz am Rhein, wo die Ministerinnen und Minister sich 3 Tage getroffen haben. Und es gab eine Sitzung, wo die Ratspräsidentin, die deutsche Agrarministerin Klöckner, alle Organisationen eingeladen hatte für eine Stunde, um sich anzuhören, warum denn überhaupt Proteste sind bei dieser Agrarministerkonferenz. Es waren viele Organisationen da und ich hatte die Gelegenheit, als Erster zu sprechen und habe darauf hingewiesen, wo wir einig sind, nämlich, dass die europäische Agrarpolitik geändert werden muss, die Preispolitik, die Bodenpolitik, in der Frage der Gentechnik und aber auch in der Auseinandersetzung um das EU-Mercosur-Abkommen. Und es war für mich überraschend, dass viele dieser Protestorganisationen, die sonst noch nicht so sehr zusammengearbeitet haben, sich auf verschiedene Punkte verständigen konnten. Wir sind uns einig geworden, die europäischen Minister und Ministerinnen aufzufordern, dass das EU-Mercosur-Abkommen dringend gestoppt werden muss. Nicht nur, weil man nicht mit einem Faschisten einen Vertrag unterschreiben sollte, sondern weil es dringend ist, dass wir die Klimafrage und die Menschenrechtsfrage verbinden, auch mit der wirtschaftlichen Existenzfrage der Betriebe. Und das scheint mir ein wichtiger Punkt zu sein, den wir hier heute auch in der Diskussion herausgelöst haben. Wie kriegen wir denn Bündnispartner? Und ich habe deshalb die Frage gestellt, wir sollten uns nicht so sehr verengen, schon gar nicht auf eine Definitionsfrage, bist du denn mit 3 Kühen ein Kleinbauer oder bist du mit 30 Kühen ein Kleinbauer? Wir kommen in eine Situation, wo es insgesamt darum geht, wie die Landwirtschaft in Europa, wie die Landwirtschaft in der Welt und in den einzelnen Mitgliedsländern überhaupt noch gerettet werden kann gegenüber der Konzernmacht. Und deshalb gibt es auch Zusammenschlüsse. Und ich will am Schluss sagen, wir haben seit 10 Jahren, gehen wir auf die Straße mit der Wir haben satt-Demonstration in Berlin anlässlich der Internationalen Grünen Woche. Wir haben seit 5 Jahren auf dem Programm, dass wir uns aufmachen, auch zur internationalen Agrarministerkonferenz, die stattfindet, immer mit 60, 70 Ministerinnen und Ministern. Ich bin euch sehr dankbar, dass ihr reingebracht habt, die Auseinandersetzung um die internationalen Bauernrechte. Und sie ist tatsächlich auch in diese Konferenz mittlerweile eingeflossen. Es ist ein dickes und schweres Brett, was wir da zu bohren haben. Aber wir haben uns gesagt, wir brauchen starke gesellschaftliche Bündnispartner, um diese Frage der Bauernrechte auch mit einem derartigen politischen Druck zu versehen, dass wir sagen können, wir haben auch etwas erreicht und wir sind meines Erachtens auf einem guten Weg. Ich nenne nochmal den Stichpunkt EU-Mercosur-Abkommen. An dieser Frage können wir eine breite Einheit hinbekommen, dass dieses Abkommen nicht zustande kommt. Und das wäre ein großer Erfolg, auch gegenüber den Staaten, die meinen, sie könnten immer noch mit der Landwirtschaft Schlitten fahren. Ich bin der Auffassung, diese Welt braucht die bäuerliche Landwirtschaft. Covid-19 hat gezeigt, dass die internationalen globalisierten Lieferketten zusammengebrochen sind. Es gibt eine neue Diskussion in den Gesellschaften, wie denn überhaupt Ernährungssouveränität zu realisieren ist. Und deshalb lasst uns gemeinsam auch die beiden nächsten Konferenztage bestreiten und überlegen, wie wir hier tatsächlich zu Erfolgen kommen. Wir haben es uns durch unsere langjährige Arbeit verdient. Vielen Dank.
Danke dir, Georg, dass du das so wunderbar das abgerundet zusammengebunden hast und nochmal vor allen Dingen auch den Bezug von der internationalen europäischen Ebene hier zu Deutschland hergestellt hast. Ich schließe jetzt das Webinar nochmal mit dem Hinweis auf Dienstag. Georg hat es gerade schon gesagt, zum 2. Online-Seminar um 9 Uhr und sowie dann am Mittwoch dem Präsenzseminar in Kassel. Eine letzte Anmerkung noch ein vielen Dank an die Übersetzerinnen, die uns hier die ganze Zeit jetzt die Präsentation und die Fragen übersetzt haben. Und vielen Dank natürlich an alle Referentinnen und Referenten. Und am Dienstagmorgen sind wir mit Michael Windfuhr vom Deutschen Institut für Menschenrechte und Anna-Maria Soares-Franco von FIR International, die seit vielen Jahren vor allem in Genf auch die Verhandlungen und den Kampf für die UNDROP begleitet hat. Genau, und wünsche allen einen schönen Freitag und vor allen Dingen ein schönes Wochenende. Tschüss.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.